Welcome to the Ninth Hour Podcast. I'm Michael, and I'm joined by Travis from the team and Wesley, a player from Card Academy. Coincidentally, our sponsor is Card Academy, where you can find all the latest in WS cards and supplies. Please be sure to check them out. Today's podcast is going to be about the 2017 ban list, which just took effect a couple of days ago. Uh, this time around, we only have a couple of changes and hit some seemingly unexpected sets. From Is the Order a Rabbit or Gochiusa? We have the 3-2 Kokochino finisher and the 1-0 Kokoa backup, the anti-change backup, being put on a choice one of two, where if you have any copies of one, you can't have the other in your deck. And from Nisekoi, where the support Raku, which salvages pendants, has been taken off the choice list. The other cards for Nisekoi remain unchanged, including the old terror Marika, which still remains at one in deck. So let's kick things off. Travis, you have a lot of experience with Gochiusa. Um, what do you think about the changes that have come to this in the choice one of two?
I already know that there are going to be many that don't share the same opinion I do, but I feel with the printing of Kimono Friends, like I understand that Gochiusa needed to be touched in general because yes, it was one of the highest representing sets in the tournaments and such like that. But with the printing of Kimono Friends, I really feel that Gochiusa didn't need to be touched. But I do agree with the 3-2 Cochino being put on the choice, because that card could finish games by itself in one go without the need of any other help. But the 1-0 counter, I actually really don't agree with being there, simply because, like, the biggest argument I've seen for it is that it's used to prevent on reverse combos, especially at level 1. I feel that's false. I feel that it's more used at the end game where Gochi Yusa really doesn't have the power levels, even with 2-5 and 3K backups, to hit against restanders, clock kickers, and such like that. Some clock kickers do hit upwards 17K plus. That is more used to prevent taking like one extra damage or preventing like an on reverse combo or something like that at a later level instead of at level 1.
So, to ask a follow up question, what would you have put on that choose list? If you
I
had control of that, what would you have put with the Cocochino?
I would have put the either the 0-0 Rize that checks top three or reveals up to top three on play for a Rabbit House character to filter into your hand,
Mm-hmm.
or the 0-0 Salvage Kokoa Riki. Because the thing about the 0-0 Rize is it let you get so many consistence, like such good consistency in getting the 3-2 Cochinos into your hand or just being able to filter unneeded cards out of your hand. So it would slow down the deck a little bit and force you to run other filter options. Also slow down the milling in a sense. But the 0-0 Koko Riki would let you be able to hit that level 1 a lot earlier to help speed up with the consistency of the deck as well. Because your opponent most likely be 0. That Riki could send you to level 1. You can just go ahead and light a combo right off the bat.
Sure. I think we'll follow up more on that um, later because we hit on a lot of points there, and I'm sure that our listeners might already be debating with us in their heads. So, getting back to Nisekoi now, this one is actually something that arguably increases the power. Now, Wesley, I know that you've had some experience playing Nisekoi in the English side of the game. And one thing about the English printing of Nisekoi, from the obvious changes in the strengths of the finishers, it's always still enjoyed the consistency in having Raku and the pendants and Free Fresh in the same deck. What do you think about this adjustment to the set?
I feel like in the Japanese side, like with the Raku coming off, I mean, yeah, you get to salvage pendants, which is good, but it's still on the choice. So even if you'd like to run the free fresh, you can't. And then even with Marika still being at a one of, you still really can't. She's not as reliable, I feel like, as like lighting off, because then you're more forced to run like a different build, in my opinion. Like a lot of builds, like the weapon daughter build could be one, even though it doesn't really use any of the cards off the ban list.
Well, yeah, that one completely dodged everything. It's kind of a little hidden novelty in the set. I know that in the Bay Area there was one player who frustrated the heck out of the local player base by running the Weapon Daughter build because +2 Soul can hit really hard. So let's go through and discuss what we think these sets can do to account for this reduction or increase in power. And only these sets specifically. We'll be adding on to the discussion later what we think could be affected or what could affect other sets as well. But for our first point here, we'll only be talking about the affected sets. So Travis, back to you. What do you think could be done on Gochiusa's side to account for the loss of either a great finisher or a great anti-change or anti-combo, really, counter?
Um, it, if you decide to keep the red blue build, I could kind of see it going towards the level. Like, obviously, it's going to be the Cochino choice. You're going to have to give up the counter in this case. But what I could see being done is combining combos from the mono red Gochiusa deck, especially the 0/0 Rize. Believe it's a 2K1 if I remember correctly. Um, Combo that mills 3 if you hit 3 Rabbit House characters, salvage 1. It
Mhm.
will it will make the deck mill through faster, which could aid in trying to hold off some damage numbers, is what the deck did like to do. So it could be a good substitute for at least the level 0 to level 1 combo. Or the deck could be completely scrapped and go back to the mono blue variant with the non-condition plus combos essentially, and the which also combos with the finisher, and then tech in the new Go Pack promo that heals the stock.
Right, I remember that. That was an interesting new addition. It almost felt like they were hinting at, "Hey, you guys should use this again." But we're not going to be discussing the reasoning for these bans. We're only going to be talking about. This is just for everybody listening. We're not going to be talking about or providing commentary for the reasons that these bans were done, because I think there are plenty of people who are all across the board in terms of their reactions to these changes, and it's way too easy to have a discussion where everybody's angry or elated about something. But so Wesley, with Nisekoi's, I guess, kind of return to slightly more consistent deck builds, what do you think will happen to the deck now? From my observation, with Nisekoi, those that were still running the pendant builds have started to go three color, like red, green, blue, with a lot of searching power, especially at level 3 and early on. And again, this is dodging the green, yellow um, weapon build. Um, do you think that the other uh, side builds of the set will become more or less viable?
With the meta that it stands right now, I could possibly making it see a return. Yeah, especially like with that tricolor, that like green blue with like a splash of red, because you'll always want to try and splash a Marika if you're playing pendants. Um, it's kind of a throw up, honest. Like one of those sets, like it could and it couldn't. It could still perfectly be viable, but against some other sets in the meta, like it could just shut down, I suppose.
Right, and we'll get to which sets specifically might interact with that in a bit. So now that we've talked a bit about what the sets could do, let's take a little account of what we think about these sets' viability. Now, and again, this is only in a vacuum. We'll get to other newer sets later on. But if no other sets existed um, before the ban, or excuse me, after the ban list took effect, Travis, what do you think about the viability of Gochiusa, kind of as just as a whole? Do you think it's still a um, a set worth building or testing out, at least for competitive play?
Um, yes, it is actually. But before I continue, how when you say newer sets, which sets am I omitting?
Basically, we're not talking about Kimono Friends yet.
Okay, okay. So if we're not going to talk about that set,
Spoiler alert,
well,
everyone.
we will, but for the purpose of this portion, we won't. Um, Goshiusa will still be viable. Um, it might still take a little coaxing against Vivid Strike because Vivid Strike's finisher is still incredibly bonkers in my opinion. Opinion. It will. I think it will kind of have a smaller or a little harder matchup. With this in effect against Persona 5. Not simply because of its finishing power, because its 2-1 combo I felt was actually really heavily hit from that Coco counter.
Mhm.
So with that out of the picture, since Gochiusa itself does have lower power levels, and Persona 5 being one of the about only sets that I see having like a level 1 anti-change would be decent against due to the 2-1 early play,
Mhm.
Persona 5 will kind of have an upper hand against Gochiusa in that case, since it does not
Well,
have to worry about losing its plus.
let's also remember that there's a little bit of local bias in that because I know that in at least the Ohio area, there tends to be a little bit more of a concentration of Persona. I know that in the Bay Area, speaking for at least the South Bay's player base, Persona does not see as much play. It's still played, but I don't think it sees quite as much as you might.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Um, but aside from that, in like in general sense, Gochiusa is still viable. A lot of the builds are still good, especially with that extra booster back in December. It's just going to take a little more playing if you still want to continue red blue.
Right. So, Wesley, what do you think about Nisekoi? I know that you might have a different view about the set itself. Do you think it's going to be more dangerous now that it gets one of its tools back?
I honestly don't believe it'll be more dangerous. It might be a little more popular, but in terms of like Marika trying to hit power levels, especially with the meta, is like you got like Vivid Strike and um, like some of like the other meta sets in the current meta right now.
Mm-hmm.
Marika just cannot compensate for that power level. She got power creep so bad that even with the Raku off, she still can't hit big enough power levels, in my opinion, to actually do a bunch of damage.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not like the days where we had three, or where we were able to have four copies in a deck and then run out three and then win from level two. Oh man, those were
could I
interesting.
throw a counterpoint to that?
What were you going to say?
Um, Level 1 still kind of tricky though. Like yeah, the level 3 marka itself won't, but there are actually some promos that could help that level 3 marka out in terms of power levels. Like there is a Married Life clone in Nisekoi. That's expensive, but there is
Yeah.
one of those that could help its level 1 to try and keep its consistency despite all these new sets, but level 3 it's still, I would agree, still kind of a toss up.
Oh yeah, that would be the Summer Colors Chitoge, right?
Yes,
That's the red one. Yeah, I remember that. That one. That yes was a very expensive PR.
almost as
uh,
expensive as the Mission Twilight Xenon when it was just a CD promo.
yeah. Oh yeah. Those were some whew, pretty expensive cards. So um, now we'll be getting to the kind of what happens after Kimono Friends enters the meta. But before we get to that, um, it's kind of arguable about what roles the decks might play in the meta. For example, um, when Kantai was very new, it was very clear that that was the deck that ran the most hate effects, with things to tax healing and salvaging effects. Um, Gochiusa probably has a spot in the meta as a very um, offensive deck, as one that can just like burn, burn something absolutely ridiculously. Um, and Nisekoi has, well, quite a history, such that it came out on the English side looking very different. Um, what do you think could happen with other sets? Now let's think about the greater game now. What could other decks do to either capitalize on this or even become more viable? So Wesley, I'll start with you. I know that you have some experience with SAO, and thing that I think that many players could agree with is that SAO has never been like the go-to deck, but it has been pretty darn consistent. It's always been a contender. Um, it's won number of events, and but it's people. I haven't yet to hear an overwhelming um, majority of players calling it broken. Do you think that SAO will be affected by this very narrow ban list?
I could maybe see it making a bit of a more comeback due to the fact that the Cochino got hit, and so if they decide to do run the sat counter, then their level the Gotcha use is level 3 and Sword Art's level 3. It would kind of run over, like Sword Art would kind of run over them. I feel like because
Yeah,
especially like most people nowadays are playing last shot with splash green for the Zekin.
yeah. That seems like the very popular thing to do, and once we introduce Kimono Friends, once again, last shot or basically anything bigger than burn one is going to look uh, quite a bit different, arguably. So, Travis, what do you think about what other sets could do, or what other sets could be affected by this?
I, th- I think a lot of sets, at least in Japan, they had to build their decks to kind of counteract what Gochiuso is trying to do. It's similar to like wall decks or walling at level 1, so that way it's a lot harder for them to light their plus combo to try and hinder them slightly, to trying to trying to build some form of high compression, so that way when it gets to level 3 they aren't going to be hit as hard by a Cochino as they would if they were just if they were just freshly refreshed with barely any compression, so to say.
Hmm.
So a lot of those decks could probably start to take out some of those wall cards to perhaps put in tech that would help them achieve what the goal of the set's trying to do as a whole without looking at any other sets interfering with it.
Hmm.
Or they could leave those in case of, maybe Vivid Strike coming up to take what Gochiusa left behind, and still keeping those wall decks in, because Vivid Strike does have similarity to Gochiusa, where it does have a Shimikaze like plus combo and an almost similar combo to Cochino at level 3.
So, as kind of a counterpoint to that, though, arguably, we could say that there has always been an incentive to maintain some semblance of power at level one, because the way that the game has been being, I guess, made for the last couple of years, if not a little longer, level one has kind of been the place where people look for their like first and most meaningful advantages in the game. We get the search reverses or just search combos. We don't see things that really deal damage. We see things that try to uh, aim for greater card advantage. Um, And as we've said in a previous article, right, there's uh, having power levels can translate into card advantage. It's just that because it doesn't involve a combo, it looks slower or it looks worse, just because it doesn't have as much perhaps of a damage push. But that damage push can come later when you're attacking into their empty board, and you don't have to use a climax for that. What do you think?
Uh, I would actually have to agree with that because a climax is a lot doesn't look as appealing to play when they have a empty board because you don't really want to overswing, so to say.
Right.
So
I mean, there are some times where you want to, so you can like really punish them. But you're right. Yeah, using a climax on an empty board, unless there's something like really awesome to do, like searching out a bunch of cards from your deck, it's not really great value.
oh yeah, unless it involves like against like searching cards, drawing cards, etc., without needing a reverse, or if you need to level up your opponent to activate the effect, it does look appealing. But
Right.
in general, as a sense, it's I guess it would depend on the um board state of the opposing player.
Yeah. I mean, as far as CX combos needing to level up, that just brought me back to my yellow red Puyo Puyo deck.
Oh no.
But as much as I would love to use that deck, we now have to address the elephant, I guess, or maybe cat or penguin, or how
Raccoon.
about the whole zoo?
How about a
Uh,
dolphin?
Zoo
While
in the
we're at
room?
it.
Yeah. So, Kemono Friends has just come out, and there is a new card in it that prevents both players from hitting burn one effect. It's much like Charlotte's Searcher, except this one is an actual just plus when it's, I believe, either reversed or sent to the waiting room.
It's when it becomes reversed.
Okay, when it's
Pay
reversed,
one, clock yourself. Search for a friend's character. Not sure if there's a level restriction. I'm not looking at the translation right now. And then if you are level 2 or lower, it gets sent to memory. While in memory, neither player can take damage from their respective opponent's auto abilities that deal 1 damage or less.
right? So for that ability, we have basically a Musashi that mills a 0 will be prevented. But if a Musashi, which is the punish burn, the burn X, if it mills a 1, which will deal 2 damage, it will still happen. So, but while it's in memory, Cocochino, very sad. Arl, very sad. Um, Lots of things, very sad. But interestingly, things like, let's see, New Ilia, which burns 2 and 5, or Sinon, everybody's favorite sniper, headshot for 4, still goes off. So um, I could say that in the past, at least for WGP seasons, um, a lot of winning decks have been rewarded for adopting the latest set with the most powerful abilities, and um, I will say that this season I will not be surprised. I would not be surprised if a good number of Kemono decks were to qualify, because I think that this prevent burn one is one of the um, maybe not best, but certainly one of the hottest abilities that we've seen in a while. Pun not intended. Um, because it shuts off so many things, and I've said this before that burn one is like one of the best effects to get. Why? Because it's just so darn reliable. It's so great to get your opponent to cancel on just the one, so that the rest of the damage can go through, or if they're at 3-6, right, to just close the game. Um, and now we could probably do an entirely separate podcast for this, but um, guys, with the potential for a lot of burn one prevention being on everybody's radar, what do you think the season will look like this year? Wesley, we'll start with you.
I think for WGP, we're going to be seeing a lot of like My opinion, I think we're going to see a lot of Sword Art. We're going to see Love Live Sunshine. Definitely going to see Kimono. Potentially Nisekoi.
Well, if older players are wanting to dust off their old cards, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest contenders this year are definitely going to be Love Live Sunshine, Sword Art, and probably Rewrite too, because they have a restand combo, I do believe.
Yeah. Oh, I can just feel that Aaron, who's been in our past casts before, just kind of rolling over now because he wants CG or Cinderella Girls to be unrestricted, and that he thinks that not a whole lot will change with the meta. But he kind of says this as a die-hard Idolmaster player, and so Travis, what do you think about what the meta for this year will look like?
I think I think we are going again to see a lot of SAO because SAO really isn't hit by Nisekoi or not Nisekoi, sorry. Um Kimono Friends because its main finisher does not need burn ones. It's a straight up shot for 4 and then you depending on how you build the deck. Otherwise it could have clock kickers or
Yeah,
clock or another clock kicker since SAO does now have 2 clock kickers.
that's right. Oh man, so many options.
Yeah. Or they could just go switch combo. But I still feel like the last shot combo is going to be the more relevant because personal reasons.
Sure.
And valid ones, I believe. But again, personal. Uh, I believe there's still going to be some Gochiusa mono blue variants. I feel like a lot of people are going to be turned off from playing red blue because the threat of Kimono being there.
Mm-hmm.
Vivid Strike will still most likely be popular. And then pretty much any of the older sets that we've seen come out that don't rely on burn ones, such as like ReZero, it can just sit on a rem wall the entire game and be perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Rewrite. Rewrite's finisher does, like, if you play the Kotaro, and Kotori build, it does have one of its cards kind of hit by Kimono, but with it sitting behind Neg 2 Soul Wall most of the game, I don't think it's going to be that much affected by Kimono.
So I'd like to challenge this notion a little bit because let's say that we do have a player or two who just says, "Oh, I don't care about the fact that there might be a lot of Kimono friends. I'm just going to run in there with my burn one effects. Like I'm going to run Puyo Puyo or TLR or Gochiusa and just account for the potential anti-burn effect by just soul rushing my opponent. Just forget everything else, rush them to like level 3 by going all in, to heck with a card advantage. Do you think that that kind of approach could be remotely viable? And this is a question for both of you. Travis, what do you think?
I think it could be because, especially with those burn one effects, it could be possible because I've had it happen to me with Charlotte before that you get sent to level 3 before you even see your anti-damage. So they are still able to get to their finishers to finish you off if you can't get that there in time. So the burn one decks in that case could actually still be viable.
If they were to switch out their early and mid game into something like crazy aggressive, maybe.
Maybe, or just hope their opponent gets with a bad hand.
Now, I do want to point this out for the listeners, though, that what I'm describing is kind of a very general strategy. It can apply potentially to a lot of decks. Like these different sets that I was just mentioning do have different ways of actually pulling that off. One of them that I know off the top of my head is Puyo Puyo, where you could use the level 1 like red +2 soul to just like try to rush the heck out of your opponent as a way to address that. And one of the things that the deck can also do at later levels is just side attack for one at level 3 if it does run that +2 soul in it. But again, that's a very specific example. A lot of other decks could find a way to do that. It's just that
it's really risky.
yeah, it's risky because you then will also get beaten by the quote unquote honest strategy of just a the old fashioned beatdown where you just have overwhelming numbers at level 1. Basically, the soundless voice test, right? Where if you can't beat something running soundless voice, or basically that has 10, 11k power at level 1, you better have some darn good utility to make up for that, or something else to address that. Leslie, what do you think about the potential for somebody to still run in there with a more crazily aggressive deck?
I will also agree with that. I think it could still perfectly be viable. Like you could, like I'll go back to Nisekoi, especially with the 1/0 Seshiro that combos with the +2 soul. If you just slam a +2 soul down every turn, it can be really oppressive to your opponent. And Madoka has a +2 soul too, so you could always you can just keep playing +2 souls. Um, I can't think of any other.
We're getting dangerously close to memeing at this point because everybody says, right, either jokingly or after just losing to it, that man, +2 soul's the best. But
I mean, that was the philosophy of a lot of English players. They would just play a +2 soul, or they would just play a climax every turn.
whoa, this was my philosophy too, way back when I was just like, man, +2 soul's so good. I should just run 8 of these.
Let's be honest.
I think a lot of players, maybe at some point or another, might just get so ridiculously unlucky during a game that +2 soul starts looking really attractive. I think that might just be, a bias that many of us will have when we play the game long enough.
Let's be honest. When we all started this game, +2 soul was the best thing that ever came around.
I mean, I still remember when the site was very, very new. As a joke, I gave Felix asked me for a deck, so I just handed him the vanilla +2 soul, and he beat me in round 1. And I was very sad because that was a game where I drew nothing but level 2s, and I literally could not play anything for turns. And by the time I could, I was already like 2-5, and he was able to just vanilla encore everything. And yeah, I still remember that game. It was very, very, very funny. Yeah, I was not mad about that. I was just like, darn, that's really unfortunate. But it at least was able to illustrate what you can do, like how disgusting things can get if you get really unlucky and your opponent does have the tools to kind of maximize the punishment. So let's get to the last question now. Given this new ban list and all these new sets, for this season, what would you consider playing? What are the sets that you would either try to play with or that you might take to an event? Let's see if we can keep this to your top 3 and just a brief reason why. Wesley, what is your top 3 for this season?
Let's see. I would definitely pick Sword Art as one of them, simply due to the fact of the Xenon Burn 4 is right at that sweet spot where it's not overswinging a whole bunch, but it's also not underswinging. It's just a good middle ground.
3 is the best middle ground, I'll say. We've done the math on that. 3 is the best, but yeah, 4 kind of goes a little bit into the greedy territory. Not that I want to make it sound like I'm saying you're wrong, but it edges on the greedier end of things. But yeah, you're right. It is pretty nice. Certainly not the 5 that we once had. That was greedy. So what other sets?
If I actually could get a hold of it, I would definitely think about taking Del Sagno as well, because the 2/1 early entry combo, you play the wind trigger and you just search your deck. I think that's super powerful. Plus, it has an early entry healer that I really like. You can almost get a free restand off too, with the Playing in the Creek event. And then my third one. That one's kind of tough. I mean, honestly, maybe like IMOS, maybe, because IMOS is always really going to be popular, and it
Well, you
still
still
is.
get access to a Brainstorm 5, which is
Yeah.
like, inherently more unfair than almost every other Brainstormer that we have.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like, if personally, I would play Transing Pulse, but I'm leaning more towards Kome at this point, besides
Mhm.
Ren, because like you can grab Climax with Kome, and it's not like a neg. It's like a hand fix, I guess.
Yeah, it's fixing.
Well, like yeah, I guess in that sense it would be fixing if you decide to grab something, but like if you can just like straight mill 4,
Yeah,
which I find also to be powerful. Especially like you just mill through your entire deck and it helps you compress more, especially if you're playing IMOS.
yeah. Okay, so we have SAO, uh, DC, and Idolmaster. Travis, what 3 sets would you consider looking at for this season?
SAO is definitely going to be the first set I look at this season. Might not be what I will play. Simply because SAO is getting a update booster, is getting the ordinal scale booster in October, which could give it a lot of effects that, well, we obviously don't know what we're going to get, but it could give it a lot of effects that could give it the upper hand with this Komodo Friends coming into play now. Um, the second set I would consider taking would be Railgun. Uh,
Railgun.
the 3-2 early play for board control is just. There have been some games I've had with that set where that 3-2 has stumbled my opponent to the point where it's just really difficult to recover, especially
Mhm.
if I end up getting rid of one of their important back rows that's like a one of in the deck and they have no way to get it until it's back in their deck.
Right.
And then it also does have a secondary finisher in the case it does run into Kimono, where it's just on attack, pay 2, ditch 2, rest something, restand if your center attacks. So it does have that. And then my third set, I'm gonna have to give it to Gochi Yusa. I just that the blue for me, surprise blue, is probably like one of the smoothest decks I've played in that set. So just going back to something that's familiar for me would actually is just something that I feel would make it a little bit, uh, I guess, sort of an upper hand against some of these sets. Because if I know what I'm doing with the deck and I know what I'm playing against, so to say, it's just going to be a lot more comfortable to play.
Hmm. Well, I think for me, my 3 sets, and I guess I'm going to be kind of all over the place here. One of the sets that I would take um, would be, I mean, the namesake Kimono Friends. I want to test the heck out of that set to not even to just know how to use it, but to know what to expect from the set because, um, again, in a tournament, especially, a surprise factor is huge. And because the set is so powerful, I do think that people will have to at least know what to expect from a deck. Um, that uses one of the many combos that or color combinations that it has. And I do think that the set is powerful enough to warrant like serious play. Second set, hard for me to say because my experience with all these cards is only so wide. Like to talk about your point about Railgun, like I've been watching uh, some games in my locals, and Felix has been running Railgun on some weeks, and the things that that deck does is disgusting. And so um, uh, I don't think that I would take it myself, but I do want to give a nod to that point. Um, I think I might try either Puyo Puyo or TLR. Um, if I felt like being more aggressive, I would try Puyo just because it can have the option to +2 soul, even if Arl gets shut down, or TLR because at the end of the day, they're still the Yamis that it uses to finish the game are still hexproof, so they can't be rested with the paper airplane from Kemono Friends, or even the targeted by another like money counter or darkness plan. um, for other sets. So I mean that just for it being hexproof is probably worth looking into. That and you still get to play Puyo or TLR, in which case anything that's not Kimono Friends that basically doesn't have that anti-damage effect is probably going to have a very hard time winning, unless your luck is atrocious, in which case just about anything will lose. Um, as far as a third set, hmm, let's see, Kimono Friends, Puyo or TLR, at least one of those aggressive sets, and then can't really think of a third one. I'd probably just have to shoehorn those two to one, or um, make a return to something that heals a lot. So, and there is no shortage of sets that can, heal a ton. Um, I know that Index does have a lot of healing in it, and I guess it's part of the Railgun family too. So, um, but it is a different set, and maybe something with purely defensive power could also be a viable if we're expecting people to play, I guess, more defensively during the season. It's kind of a difficult call to make, but um, I think it's still something that could be viable. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion about the ban list. I want to thank again Travis and Wesley for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank
Yep,
you for having me.
once again, our sponsor is Card Academy, where you can find all the latest in WS cards and supplies. This is Michael, and this has been the 9th Hour Podcast. Thanks for listening.